Hey, campfire crew, let's get it on.
What the hell are you doing in my graveyard?
He Just Kept Screaming by May of Tay. This happened in 2023, and I still have the occasional nightmare about it. I worked in sterile services, cleaning used surgical instruments for doctors and getting them back to the operating theaters. One night near the end of my shift, around 5 or 6 p.m., I was taking a trolley full of instruments to a ward on the other side of the hospital. As I got about a quarter of the way there, I started to hear a noise. It wasn't completely noticeable, and I think at first I thought it was the wind coming through cracks in the doors. It was easy to tune out, and I probably would have forgotten about it if I had stayed at that distance. But then I started getting closer, and it was getting harder to ignore. So, after I delivered the trolley, I decided to walk further through the hospital to see where the noise was coming from. My shift was basically over, so it didn't matter if it took me a little longer to get back. I saw a couple of nurses rushing in and out of a room at the end of the corridor where the sound was coming from. At that point, from the distance I was standing, it sounded like a broken, high-pitched drill. One nurse was even covering her ears like she couldn't bear listening to it any longer. Then, as I was about 20 or 30 feet away, one of the nurses swung open the door directly ahead of me, and my stomach felt like it dropped to my feet. There was a malnourished man in a bed with his mouth uncomfortably wide open, screaming. He was surrounded by doctors, and his face looked almost dark blue, and we locked eyes for what felt like an entire minute. As soon as I discovered the source of the noise, it's like the context of the situation changed the way I perceived the sound altogether. The pitch of his scream never changed. The volume never got quieter. He never gasped for air. He just kept screaming. I've dreamt about this so many times at this point that I'm not even sure if his face was as scary as I remember it, but I swear I could see the veins popping out of his forehead. I don't know if it was a surgery that went wrong, if his anesthesia wore off too early, or if the guy was just batshit crazy, but it makes no sense how he was able to scream out in pain for that long. It took me 5 minutes to deliver trolleys to that ward, and I heard the noise the entire time. I'm sure there's ways to rationalize it, like maybe the sound wasn't coming from the man and it just seemed that way because he had his mouth open in such a position that it looked like it was. Or maybe it was a weird audio phenomenon where the long empty hospital corridors bounced the sound of his screams back and forth, so it only appeared as though he never stopped to catch his breath. I just prefer not to think about it. This is not a joke. My House is Haunted by Prestigious Pace. From what I can remember, this haunting started about a month ago when I went out to my garage. Keep in mind, there was no wind outside, but when I opened my garage door, I pushed it towards the wall. Not so hard that it would bounce back, but not so light that it wouldn't make it to the wall. It was just an average push. I stepped into the garage and immediately got this feeling of unexplainable dread. I opened the fridge anyway when I turned to the garage door, and it started swinging. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I grabbed whatever I needed and bolted out of there as fast as I could because I suddenly got the feeling the door would slam. And that's how it all started. It's only escalated from there. For about a week or two after that, nothing much happened from what I remember. Just a few small haunting-type things here and there where I would feel something behind me and stuff like that. Then, one time, my dad had taken my dog out on a walk and left me at the house by myself. No one else was home except for me, and all the doors were locked. I was chilling on my phone when I heard the unmistakable sound of my dog's lead being taken off and him shaking. I called out to my dad, assuming he was home from the walk, but I got no answer. I heard shuffling in the kitchen, so I assumed he didn't hear me since he was quite hard on hearing, especially when doing other things. But about 10 minutes went by, and I hadn't seen or heard from him, so I called his name out again, to no response. I decided to go into the kitchen, only to see that no one was there. I freaked out, and when my dad got home about 5 minutes later, I told him, only for him to brush me off. One time my grandmother came over since she has Alzheimer's and my granddad needed a break. I knew she was coming because my mom had told me, and she left to go and pick up my sister. When she got back, I heard my nan say bye to my mom, and I was confused. Where was she going? Because Grandma and my sister were already here. I went downstairs to say hi to my grandma, only to find no one there. And then my mom came home with her 30 minutes later. Another haunting that happened was when I woke up and I was getting changed, I saw a handprint on my upper thigh. And it was odd since my hand hadn't been there last night, so I went to see how big the hand was. And the handprint was smaller than mine by a decent amount. Now we get to the most active night I've ever had, the sleepover. My friend and I were having a sleepover, and we enjoyed reading. We have a field outside of our house where we decided we were going to go out and read for a bit. 2 hours and a little bit later, we came back and my sister was outside on the hammock. She looked at me confused, so I said, "Why do you look so confused?" And she said, "How long were you guys gone for?" I was a little bit confused, and am now. But I replied and said, 2 hours. We just left after dinner. And she said, "That's so creepy. I literally heard you guys laughing and shuffling around in the room." I froze. My friend and I were literally scared. It was about 11 o'clock at night, and we were getting hungry. So we went to my popcorn machine and got some kernels and started to make popcorn. As I was walking back to the counter after putting the kernels back into the cupboard, I saw a face peeking out from behind the wall by the door, and then it quickly hid itself from me. It must have been there for a good 3 seconds. It was a little child. Couldn't have been more over 10. He was Hispanic and had weirdly void eyes. I told my friend and she freaked out, so we ran upstairs. We went into my parents' room because it was the closest one from the stairs, and it's right next to the top step on the left. My bedroom is all the way at the end of the hall. We were in my parents' bedroom for a bit, but then we decided we wanted to play cards. But the cards were in my bedroom on the other end of the hall. So we decided to run down to it, and after about halfway down the hallway, I started to feel dread, like I was being followed. So I turned around and said I thought something was there. We ran into my room, grabbed the cards, and then ran back. About 2 minutes later, my sister burst in, saying, "Guys, I want to tell you something, but I don't want to scare you." I gulped, and I pressed her for a follow-up, and she said, "Well, when I was out on the hammock, I could see you guys come out of the room through the window, because I could see the light filling the hallway. About 2 seconds after you guys came out, I saw a third figure start to follow you, but then dash down the stairs." I froze. Me and my friend looked at each other and told her what had happened when we ran across the hallway. And we pieced it together, and we were being followed. She said it was a black shadow figure that was about 5'5", and if I didn't turn around in the hallway, God knows what would have happened. I still get an eerie feeling around the house, like I'm always being watched, and I'm scared, and I will repeat again, everything I've said here is true. I'm not kidding. This isn't a joke. I'm genuinely concerned. What should I do? The Happy Bear by V. A year ago, I found a stuffed bear at an estate sale. It was cute and charming, so I bought it. Not long after, I started having nightmares. My fiancé and I started seeing tall animals outside of our window. We live in a second-story apartment. We went from that to seeing smiling figures in the hall and bathroom mirror reflection. We called the fire department, and there wasn't any gas leak. It got more intense seeing me standing in the kitchen while I was at work, and this figure would turn around with huge, almost horse-sized teeth, grinning very wide and unhinging its jaw. And this went on for months, seeing these figures, and then the apartment started breathing. The AC would perfectly replicate the sound of deep breaths, and then stop instantly when we would check the living room where it was. When that happened on one night, there was rustling in a closet, with voices and soft cries coming from it. My fiancée opened the door and quickly shut it. She started crying and screaming, and I opened it. And that stuffed bear was in there, smiling, and it had human-like eyes. I quickly grabbed it and grabbed my handgun and walked this bear outside to a field, fired a shot, then cut up the bear into many pieces, stomping on them and burning others on the road. My fiancée and I went for a walk to clear our heads, and we came back and every single piece of the bear was gone. A month later, we moved out of that apartment. It's all a true story, and something we try not to think about. We called it a smiler. Gang, here's another story that I know I've shared in the past, but been on this kick of sharing my personal story. So, this was it's a mixture of fear and stupidity coming first, and then the fear coming second. When I was probably around 7th or 8th grade, somewhere thereabouts, in my hometown, there is a creek that runs alongside and through the village, and then directly underneath the village. It's a really big tunnel that goes all the way through the main part of the village, and then comes back out and dumps into a larger creek that runs on the other side of the village. And we would screw around in there every once in a while, just, whether we were inner tubing or just walking through it. I mean, it gets pitch dark. It does have a little bend in it, so the light for a little bit of a period of time, you can't see the front or the back of the tunnel. So it's kind of spooky, just something stupid to do when I was a kid. In the middle of that, however, was a spill out for a storm sewer drain that ran all the way up Central Avenue, which was in the middle of my village. And one night we decided to get into this storm drain and see how far we could go. We'd done it before, and some other friends of mine had gotten actually pretty far up, maybe a mile and a half, and then found a manhole to pop out of. Interspersed in this storm system was obviously storm drains and ladders to access it, and you just climb up a ladder and push the manhole out of the way and then crawl out into the middle of traffic, which I didn't do one time, but I know my brother did with some others, and it scared the shit out of some people driving, seeing a bunch of kids popping out of a manhole. But anyway, that was more funny of the experiences we had there. This time, my friend Kevin and my friend Derek and we decided to go in there. Now, we weren't prepared for the big-ass thunderstorm that was blowing over us, that we had no idea was happening, because here we are down in, underground in a storm sewer. Now, the storm sewer itself was probably 3.5 feet tall, so if you can imagine some guys, you're hunched over and a little bit of water trickling at the bottom, and you're kind of just, hustling along with your shoulders hunched, and every once in a while there'd be these breaks where I mentioned those ladders would be, and we're just in there with our flashlights, booming along, having a good old time. Some guys had G.I. Joes and other guys had Legos, and, me and my idiot friends played in the sewer. And no sewage, folks. It's a storm sewer. So just rainwater was down there. At any rate, the storm is raging. And every once in a while when we come to these, areas where there's a ladder going up, we can see water pouring in. And not thinking anything of it, we kept on going. But then we noticed that the water that was just a trickle at our feet when we got into this thing was starting to rise, and rise pretty rapidly. So we put 2 and 2 together and said, gee, maybe we need to get out of here. So we turned around and got back to the closest ladder. And I can't remember who, somebody shimmied up, but it was actually a drain in a parking lot. And we could see, whatever daylight was up there during the storm. And somebody had parked their car, their tire, front or back tire, I don't know, on it. So we couldn't push it up to get out. The grate was not going anywhere. So we had to go back the way we came. We had to go all the way back to the bigger tunnel. And as I mentioned, the water's getting higher and higher and higher. Now it's up to and past our knees, and none of us are saying anything. We're just trying to hustle as fast as we can. But I know we're all starting to get pretty shit scared because, there's nowhere for this water to go except up. And if it goes all the way up, there's no more room for us to breathe. So we're hustling and hustling and hustling, and the water's getting higher and higher and higher. And now it's really, literally, up to, midway or a little bit past midway of our chests as we're, bent over. And we're moving through, and thank God we got to the end. Trying to hustle, holding a flashlight up by the side of your head as the water's getting higher and higher and, pushing us along too, because obviously there's a lot of force behind this. We pop out into the main tunnel and kind of turn around when we've got our bearings and we're, breathing heavily and terrified that we almost just fucking drown. We look back with our flashlights, and the water is now completely to the top of this storm sewer drain and just blasting out of it. So we literally were probably about 45 seconds from being caught up in that, and there would have been 3 teenage bodies floating in the water. So no ghosts, no monsters, no crazy stuff like that, but holy shit, that was a really, really scary night. And we never went back in there after that. After this story, I think it's pretty clear why. Nothing like cheating death. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode. If you have a true scary story of any nature you'd like me to narrate, email it to unclejoshtruescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. If you'd like to support what I'm doing, there's a link to my Patreon page in the description, and of course you can also pick up some Uncle Josh and Campfire Crew merchandise. A link to my TeePublic storefront is in the description as well. If you've caught this on YouTube and you like what you heard, give the video a thumbs up, subscribe if you're not a subscriber, and maybe tell a friend about the channel. I'd appreciate it. Everyone, be excellent to each other, and until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything: a ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.